an American sitcom based on the comic strip by Hank Ketchum, hit the small screen in October of 1959 and ran until July of 1963. That sitcom was called Dennis the Menace. The series starred Jay North as Dennis Mitchell, Herbert Anderson as his father, Henry. His mother, Alice, was played by Gloria Henry. The next-door neighbor that played George Wilson was played by Joseph Kearns, and then Gale Gordon played George's brother, John Wilson. The premise of the show is about the lives of the Mitchell family, Henry, Alice, and their only child, Dennis, who is a completely energetic, absolutely trouble-prone, mischievous, but a well-meaning boy. The stories are often about the trouble that he causes his peace and quiet loving neighbor, George Wilson, and then later on, George's brother, John. While the series was based on the Dennis the Menace comic strip, there are differences that exist between the two. On the sitcom and in the comics, Dennis was basically a good, very well-intentioned boy who always tries to help people, but he winds up making the situation 10 times worse. And this is often at Mr. Wilson's expense. Now, it's kind of interesting that Jay North, who played the character of Dennis, who was a rascal and a mischievous child character in the series, Jay went on to serve in recent years as a correctional officer and an administrator, working in particular with troubled young people within the Florida juvenile justice system. 4 episodes actually feature a person named Harold Stevens Hopper, also known as Hal Hopper. This was the maternal uncle of Jay North. Hopper was married to North's mother's sister, Marie Elizabeth Cotton. This aunt and uncle are the adults who acted as the guardians for North while he worked on the show Dennis the Menace. Now, he doesn't speak highly of them at all. In past interviews, he stated that he was emotionally and physically abused by them whenever he failed to meet their high expectations that they set for him. This lady actually doled out physical punishment on the set and off the set to Jay North. None of this was known by his mother or the cast and crew back then. He grew up being a very angry person over these memories and things that he actually experienced while having to deal with this aunt. But later on in life, he managed to deal with it all, accepting the positive impact that the show had on its fans. Jay ended up putting all this behind him and moving on. On February 17th, 1962, after filming the show's 100th episode, Joseph Kearns, who played Mr. Wilson, died of a cerebral hemorrhage. The next 2 episodes were filmed without the character Mr. Wilson. How's that possible? The show wouldn't be the same without Mr. Wilson. But in steps Gale Gordon. He joined the cast for the last 6 episodes of the season as Mr. Wilson's brother, John. And he actually bore a closer resemblance to the comic strip's Mr. Wilson than did Joseph Kearns. All of this is explained by saying that John was staying as a guest while George was settling an estate back east. In the 4th and final season, John Wilson actually purchases the house from his brother, but it's never really explained where George and Martha have moved to. The final references to George and Martha Wilson were made early in the 4th season, although they are not mentioned by name after the first episode. George Wilson was referred to as the other Mr. Wilson in the 2nd episode, and John Wilson actually makes the statement in the 7th episode that he bought the house from his brother. After that, the original Wilsons are never mentioned again. Once Jay North was done with show business for good, in 1990, he actually partnered with a fellow child star named Paul Peterson from the Donna Reed Show. And they started a nonprofit called A Minor Consideration. And this was an organization that was based in California that provided counseling to kids in the entertainment industry. And it still exists and helps kids today. Now, there was actually a death hoax about Jay North in 1988. It's funny how these things come about with different people. I remember there was one at one time for Bob Denver, Abe Vigoda, and Jerry Mathers, who played the Beaver. But it's said that Jay North's mother was told that her son had died in a doctor's office. Now, this wasn't true, but it was actually reported by United Press International. Now, the series was originally sponsored by Kellogg's Cereals and also by Best Foods, and they were the makers of Skippy peanut butter. In order to appease the sponsors, Jay North actually appeared in commercials for Kellogg's Cereals. He was also in commercials for Best Foods mayonnaise, Bosco chocolate syrup, and, like I said, Skippy peanut butter. In the Skippy peanut butter commercial, Dennis and Mr. Wilson find something that they can enjoy together, the taste of Skippy peanut butter. After Dennis the Menace ended, Jay North got involved in voice acting. That's why the voice of the teenage Bam Bam on the Pebbles and Bam Bam show sounded familiar to you in 1971. He also voiced quite a few other characters during this time. Now, you can notice the Wilson and the Mitchell houses in other TV shows. Fans of the Donna Reed Show, The Partridge Family, Bewitched, and I Dream of Jeannie, and also a ton of other shows, might realize that all these shows take place on the same fictional backlot street. The Wilsons' house was the home of the Anderson family in Father Knows Best. You might not know that there was an entirely different comic called Dennis the Menace. It wasn't really related to the one that was done in the U.S. This one was only in Britain. The comic was created for the Beano by artist Davy Law. Now, to make sure nobody confused the American Dennis with the UK character, they decided to simply call the show Dennis when it aired overseas. Now, the true Dennis Mitchell character was modeled after Dennis Ketchum. He was the son of animator Hank Ketchum, who was the creator of the comic strip. Despite the Dennis on the television show being just a great character, the real Dennis suffered a pretty tragic life. When he was only 12 years old, he lost his mother to a drug overdose, and this was all while she was in the process of divorcing his father. Hank Ketchum then moved to Switzerland, but when Dennis had trouble adjusting to his new life and his new environment, his father decided to ship him off to a boarding school back in the U.S., and he stayed behind in Switzerland with his new wife and family. What a terrible scenario this is. You lose your mother, and then you also lose your father voluntarily. Dennis went on to kind of straighten his life out somewhat, and he actually joined the military and fought in Vietnam. And that's probably a whole nother story right there. After he returned home, he suffered from PTSD, and all this time he was basically estranged from his father. He knew his father very little. It's said that they would talk maybe once a year, and it was usually Dennis asking for some money. At least that's the way Hank Ketchum told it. Now, it's actually said that Jay North is the one that recommended the child actress Jeannie Russell to play Margaret Wade, the neighbor girl who had a huge crush on Dennis. He evidently saw her at the casting, liked her, and convinced the producers to hire her. Now, there are tons of guest stars that you would know that show up on this show. One that sticks out is one called Stewart, and that's played by Ron Howard. He's another one of Dennis's friends in 6 total episodes from 1959 to 1960. Now, it's important to know that Ron Howard left the show to join the Andy Griffith Show. By the end of the show's 4th season, Jay North was nearly 12 years old and was outgrowing the antics that were associated with his character. CBS decided to cancel the show in the spring of 1963. In 1963, NBC began airing reruns of the series on Saturday mornings, and they did this for 2 seasons. The show entered syndication in 1965. It has run consistently on local stations from then on. You can find it somewhere in the cable system. try to take another look at Dennis the Menace and his old pal, Mr. Wilson. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.